You that are hanging out with us online as well. We appreciate you joining us today. Just to make sure you're all in the right place, we're going to talk about the ACES and LAS Career Fair, which is next Thursday, so a week from today. For you guys that are here, what are you, LAS side or ACES side? You're what? Oh, great. Awesome, wonderful. So those of you who are online joining us, I'm sure you're probably a smattering of both as well. So this is going to be relevant to both sides. I'm on the LAS side. Jean, who's here with us, is on the ACES side. And we're just going to talk about the career fair. Briefly, I'm going to talk a little bit about resumes. So if anybody doesn't have a resume yet, you can get some assistance with that. And then we're going to walk through what to expect from today through the fair. So there are things that you actually need to do before the actual fair to get ready to sign up for sessions and so forth. So I'm going to talk about that, and then also the day of and what to expect. All right. So generally things about career services, and this applies to all career services offices on campus. So we are here to help you with your job search, figure out what you want to do with your life. So if you're thinking, like, I'm a first-year student and I don't know what I even want to major in, there are offices here on campus to assist with that. Just as Jean and I are from different offices, we actually have roughly 20 or so different offices on campus. And so there's some that are specific to a department and there's others that are specific to campus as a whole. But wherever you end up, we'll direct you to the right office. So don't worry about that. If any of you are thinking maybe you might want to consider graduate school or medical school, professional school of some sort, our offices can also assist you with that process. Of course, Handshake most likely is one of the things that you use to find out what the link was or how to register for this event tonight. That's also the main place where we post campus jobs or jobs that we hear about here on campus. So wherever they are in the world, the main platform for posting jobs. For employer events, most of those will also get posted through the Handshake platform. And then of course, things like this upcoming career fair. Our career offices can also assist you with resumes or CVs, cover letters, any kinds of documents that you need assistance writing, or you just want a second set of eyes to look through it. Have either of you guys that are here actually participated in a professional interview ever? No? Okay, well, great. I don't know about y'all online, but we all have professional mock interviews, practice interviews that you can take advantage of. Campus also has access to a site called Big Interview. And so that's where if you want to practice before you actually meet with a person to practice, the computer can assist you with that practice as well. So just Google Big Interview Illinois and you'll find it. And then hopefully you will get great offers, and our offices can also assist you with the evaluation process. This link here on the bottom is the place that you can go if you don't know who your career people are or your career offices are, to be able to find which the right office is for you. And I will share these slides with everybody who's checked in today. All right, I don't want to dwell super long on resumes because I know probably a lot of you already have those ready to go, but I do want to share a few things that you want to make sure you do and things that you don't want to do. So a few things that you don't want to do. In the North American continent, you do not want to include pictures on your resume. There are some countries where that's imperative, but here you don't want to do that. It also should not be cute. This is a professional document. So for example, I had a student several years ago whose email address was dorkboy@yahoo.com. Probably not what you want to put out there for employers to see. So use your @Illinois email address, use basic formatting and so forth. For most of our fields, there are a few exceptions if some of you are more on the advertising, graphic arts type side, but for the most part, they're really concerned about your content more than that it looks pretty. So along those same lines, I would say don't use resume templates because they put all this extra coding on the back end that you won't even see, but when a computer at a company is reading your resume, it sees it. And so it actually may detract from the actual content of your resume or even completely change what your resume says. So don't worry about making, I mean, it should look nice, but it doesn't need to look pretty, if that makes sense. So when I say poor presentation, that basically means line things up. So don't have 5 different, tabbings and bullets and margins and use a lot of different types of fonts. Just gets distracting. And then personal information. Of course, you do need to include your contact information. So your phone number, your email address. Some students will choose to include a LinkedIn address. Beyond that though, you don't want to include like personal information, maybe about your health or your social security number, or in some cases, I would even encourage students not to include religious affiliations, unless it was something that you did and put significant time in. Now, if you're wanting to be a teacher and you taught at your place of worship, that might make sense, but for other people, perhaps not. Same thing with like political student organizations. So if you're a Democrat or Republican society or something like that, unless you were a leader or president, just because those potentially could be things for discrimination, even though we know it's not legal in this country, it still unfortunately happens. The other thing I would say do not do on your resume is don't use abbreviations unless they're very, very standard. So something like BS or BA to list your degree, perfectly fine. In my side of the house, I work with chemists and chemical engineers. So a lot of times they'll use things like, can't even think of one right now, but like an instrument that we, UV vis or something like that. Somebody who's not from our side of the house probably wouldn't know what that is. So in some of those cases, you're going to want to write those out. And then cookie cutters, templates, your resume doesn't need to look like everybody else's. I would also say don't be lazy on your resume. So if there's something that you just, but you don't actually put it on there, it doesn't mean that the employer who's reading it is going to know. So if you just sort of imply that you were involved with something but don't actually state it, they might not understand that you did that. Or if you were in a research group somewhere and you're not thoroughly discussing what it was that you did, they're not going to understand what your role was. So be sure that you put everything out there, but of course you still have to keep it to one page. So don't include too much. As an undergraduate resume, you're typically looking at a one-page document, although there are a few exceptions, and then talk to your career services office about that. All right, so those do things that you want to do. Like I said, one page, so keep it brief, keep it relevant. I think a lot of times our students feel like they have to list everything they've ever done, or it's being deceitful. But in truth, you really only have to list the things that you choose to list on your resume. And those things should be things that are relevant to the position. Now, when I say relevant, my very first job I ever had, I worked at Pizza Hut. And so when I was applying for jobs after college, I still had Pizza Hut on my resume. I wasn't looking to be a Pizza Hut manager or anything like that, but I had worked with people. I had solved problems. I had spilled Cokes all over the table and had to figure that out really quickly. So being able to demonstrate those skills, that's what we call transferable skills. Those are still relevant, putting out fires and troubleshooting and working with the public. So I listed the bullets on my resume. Instead of saying served food or helped customers, I actually wrote about the things that would be relevant to the position. So positions that don't seem relevant or student organizations that don't seem relevant, if you've got skills that are relevant, they can still go on your resume. Be sure to proofread your resume very, very carefully. Don't just rely on the spell check that's on your computer program, because it does not catch everything. And on your resume, it should be a 100% perfect of what your best effort is. If you think about it, if this is something that you supposedly have time to put effort into to make it look really great, and it still has errors, what's your, man, it's Monday morning and I'm really tired and I don't want to be here at work, gonna look like? Probably lots of errors. So that's why you want to demonstrate, put your best foot forward, make sure it's perfect. If you're not good at proofreading, have somebody else take a look at it. So again, a couple of years ago, one of my chemistry students used really cute little beakers to put bullets on her resume. It just didn't look very professional. It was cute, but that wasn't really what she should have been trying to convey. She should have been trying to convey that professionalism. So your resume still needs to be professional, look professional. You also want your resume to be consistent. So if you start, say, with your education section towards the top, and maybe you've listed your degree name first and it's bold, and then on the right-hand margin, you've maybe got like your graduation date, and the second line, you've got the university name. When you move down into your experience section, it should look the same. So your title was first, your degree title in bold. So your job title should be first and bold. Your grad date was on the right-hand column or right-hand margin, so your dates of employment should be there as well. Second line was university name, so second line should be, in my case, Pizza Hut or whatever your organization name. That consistency does a couple of things. One is it shows you have good attention to detail skills, which of course is important to most employers. The other thing is it makes it really easy to read. Employers typically spend between 7 and 10 seconds on an initial run through of your resume. So you want every single one of those seconds to be focused on the content as opposed to searching for information. So making it consistent makes it easier to do that. Action verbs also make it easier to do that. So when you've got bullets describing what you did, start with an action verb as opposed to a passive verb. So passive verbs are typically things that end with an S or an ing. You don't want those kinds of verbs. So instead of saying responsible for leading, you would say led or lead a group. So focusing on that action verb just to kind of make the action go faster when they're reading. And then use lists. I think one of the things in higher education, we're taught to write a lot. You know, that first lab report you have to turn in, or the paper, you're going to try and eke out a few more pages. So we really teach you to write a lot. But on the opposite side, outside of higher education, they want you to be able to take information and condense it into a shorter format. And so that's, again, one of the reasons to have that one-page resume, but lists help you do that as opposed to big paragraphs. All right, questions from here about the resume piece? All right, and if you've got questions, those of you who are online, feel free to put them in the chat, and Jennifer, who is online with us, will be glad to answer those for you. All right, so we're gonna move on to talking about the fairs itself. So the very first thing you're going to want to do, and probably one of the most important, is research. Figure out what organizations are coming to the fair that you're interested in, and really try to keep an open mind, because there may be some that you have never heard of that actually may be a better fit than some of the ones that you have. I would also encourage you to know a little bit about yourself. So what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Do you have maybe something that's missing? So maybe you're applying for a full-time job and you've never had related work experience. So what do you have that can be relevant? I would also encourage you to take a look at your social media profiles that are out there. Unfortunately, we've had employers in previous years who decide not to pursue candidates because of things that they've seen on social media. And sometimes it's not even the things you think about. Like there was a student who was just overly negative on Twitter, just not loving her job, working over in dining services, but overly negative all the time. And so an employer saw her Twitter feed and thought, yeah, we don't want somebody with that kind of an attitude. A scarier scenario is one of my students, one of my PhD students, who actually was talking about how much he loved this particular company, and it was a consumer products company. And, oh, they're my dream company. This interview went super great. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get an interview, which doesn't sound like a bad thing to put on social media, except for the fact that another company that was thinking about interviewing him, also a consumer products company, saw his social media post on Facebook. And so decided, well, he's got it. He's going to this other company. We've got limited spots available for interviews. We're not even going to bother with him. And I know y'all can guess what happened. He did not get the job at the first company. So sometimes even posting things that you think are going to be okay or good can come back to backfire. So I would definitely encourage you to have a social media profile, but maybe keep things that are public on sites like LinkedIn, where it's going to be more professional, and things that are more like yay or nay with your friends, and keep those settings locked down, whether it's your Twitter feed or your Instagram or Facebook or whatever the case might be. All right. I mentioned researching the employers as well. On Handshake, it's pretty easy to do. You can actually look through the list of companies that have signed up and read a little bit about pretty much every single company. I would encourage you don't have to know everything about a company, but at least go to their websites for those companies that you sign up for sessions with, so you can learn just a little bit more. You definitely need to know some basics. One of the questions you never want to ask a company is, what exactly do you do? Because you should have already looked that up. You also, though, need to be able to demonstrate that you know that something about the company. So not only do you want to do the research, but actually be able to demonstrate that to a company. So maybe saying something like, oh, I was watching this YouTube video and I saw them talk, you had an intern on there talking about this. Is that still the type of projects that interns work on? So you're demonstrating to the recruiter that you've done some research, you know something about their company, and you're sort of sliding it into a nice little question that you can ask. If you can, I would encourage you to think about, I say they're pain points, but why is this employer looking for someone like you, an intern or a full-time candidate? What might be their need area? And if you can address that by having, in your elevator pitch or something like that at the beginning, you're not going to know exactly why they're hiring, but if you can guess, that actually will make them feel like you're the right fit because you've already sort of thought through what you can add and how you can add value. All right, so some other things you want to do. Keep in mind that there are some companies who will only do official interviews with students that they interact with at a career fair or at another event. So if you are at all interested in a particular company, as much as possible, you want to try to meet with them at the career fair, whether that's a group session or a one-on-one. The other thing with any fairs that are run through Handshake, like our ACES and LAS fair, is you have to sign up for times in advance. So companies will either offer group times or they'll offer individual times. And actually it's only 10 minutes, but so either a 30-minute group or a 10-minute individual one-on-one session. And basically that is just company choice completely. So usually it's how many recruiters they have available. So if they only have 1 or 2 recruiters, they're probably going to do more group sessions. Whereas if they have a number of recruiters available, they might do more individual sessions. Either way, you have to sign up for at least one of those options with any of the companies you're interested in. You can join up to 5 minutes early before your actual scheduled time, but in some cases you cannot join late. So you will get a little notification, especially in the one-on-ones, that says, okay, you've got 1 minute left. So you can kind of keep an eye if you do have back-to-back sessions to close up your conversation to be able to move into your next session so that you're not late. But as much as possible, you want to be sure you are ready to go as soon as the session opens. I would also make sure that your resume is visible to employers, and you can kind of choose whether you want it visible to everybody in the community or just to employers. But that way, when they're meeting with you, they can actually click into your resume that's listed right there on Handshake. So be sure to upload that and then have it visible. I think some companies won't even let you sign up unless it is. So the challenges that we are finding is there are some companies that are having problems with the system and figuring out how to make it work. And so sometimes they will have like on their profile saying, these are the jobs we're hiring for. And you know that your major is one of those. But when you actually go to sign up for a session, you can't sign up for whatever reason. And you can't actually see that. You could just, you won't see that as an available option for your sessions. So if that happens, I would just recommend at this point emailing career services and we can help you figure out what's going on. But in most cases, it's because the employers haven't set up their sessions correctly. So not all majors are, or not all companies are listing majors that they're really looking for. So this is kind of what your Handshake is looking like as far as how do you navigate to this page. So when you log in, you're going to see something along this line that's sort of your front page. So there's an events. You can kind of see it up in the very top corner. I put a little red circle around that. Or else sometimes you can actually see it right on the main on your main page. So that's just where you're going to go for the ACES and LAS. Click on that. It'll take you to, if you click on the LAS, the ACES one, it'll take you straight to the fair. But if you click on the events, it'll take you to this page. And then you just search for the fair. Again, here's the events, here's the career fair. I narrowed it down so that's the only things you see. And then you find the fair, you just click on that and it'll bring you to this page. Once you're on this page, basically that's going to be kind of your home page. There are some tips and so forth on that first page under the how to prepare that you can look through as well. But to find the sessions that are open to you, just click there where it says available sessions. From there, you're going to get a whole, yep, go ahead. Oh yeah, so I already had registered. So over there on the right-hand corner, you can actually see where it says registered. So it's normally blue. So click on the register to make sure that you're connected to the actual fair. All right, we're in the dark. Thanks, Sydney. So then click on the available sessions, and that will take you to the page that has everything available. You can still use some of these filters, so where it says all filters, so if you want to narrow down by just those that are specifically seeking your major or a few different fields like that, you can definitely do that too. So that's going to pop up basically and look something like that. Some students will choose any of these different fields, so maybe you want to see those that are open accepting OPT or CPT. Maybe you want to search by a specific major, you can do that, or you can just look through the whole list. There's only 114 right now, 111 that are visible to you all because the other 3 haven't paid. But there's only 111, so it shouldn't take you super long time to scroll through the whole list. All right, so this is where, so as you scroll down that first page, that home page of the fair that I showed you, this is on the bottom where you can see which employers are total there. You can't actually sign up for sessions from those pages, but it can give you a complete list of all the employers. And so I did this a couple days ago. So this is what the employer list is going to look like. The other thing that I would definitely recommend that you do, if there is a fair or a company or an employer that you're really interested in, click on that follow button, because what will happen once you click on that follow button there is anything they post, if they post a job, if they are hosting an event, if something changes on their interview schedule, that's going to notify you either through your Handshake system or even by email. So that way you can keep tabs on the companies that you're most interested in. You can also look generally here and see sort of what they're looking for. This page, again, is the employer page, so it's all the employers. Sometimes this does not line up with what's available. So if you come in here and you say, I'm a junior, but for some reason AbbVie isn't showing up as one of my available sessions, there's a couple of things that might be issues. Let's just go back to this page. So one of the things that could happen, and has been happening a lot with some of the other career fairs, is sometimes students have not listed a GPA. So if you haven't gone into your Handshake education section and put in your current GPA, you essentially have the equivalent of a 0.0 GPA. So if an employer has a GPA requirement listed for their sessions, you won't be eligible. So I have a student who has a 4.0 GPA, and a company had put down like a 2.0 requirement, but she wasn't eligible to meet with them because her GPA just wasn't listed. All right, so back to the filters page. So this is on your sessions section. So here's the one-on-one versus what the group sessions are going to look like. And it's completely up to you. PepsiCo is only offering one-on-one sessions. So if you want to meet with PepsiCo, that's your option. When you click on it, you'll actually be able to select the time, and I'll show you that in a second. For OSI, it looks like they're only doing groups. So some companies will have a little bit of both. It's up to you which you prefer. I think the main difference, if the group sessions get really, really big, so I think it's above 15, everything shuts off as far as camera, audio, all of that. So basically you would be able to hear the presenter and that's it. The only way you'd be able to interact is through the chat feature, which is just like Zoom or any other chat feature. Whereas if you're in a one-on-one, it's going to be much more interactive, obviously, because it's you and the one recruiter. Sometimes that's a little unnerving for students. So I'm going to talk in a little bit about how do you prepare for that too. All right, so this is the one-on-one with PepsiCo. So you can kind of go through and you can actually see that PepsiCo has their one-on-one set up based on the role. So they've got some supply chain roles with times available, but they've also got management roles with times available. So I would look through those, and you technically can sign up for multiple if you want to, but definitely look to see what types of, if they're listed a specific role or something like that, pick the one that best fits you for sure. And then just find the time and click on that. And once you've clicked on the 1250 or whatever, click on that confirm button at the bottom and you're good to go. Same thing with the OSI, because they're set out, the group sessions are set out like, here's the time. When you click on it and come to this page, this is what you're going to see. So all you really need to do at this point is just click confirm and then you're done. So those are basically the sessions as far as setting them up. Have you guys set up sessions yet for next week? You have. Oh, great. Good, on top of things. So we will go through to the next section. So when you actually have sessions set up, you can go to this your sessions and see what's set up for you. When you are ready and when it's time, you'll see this. Here's my one-on-one with Abby. This is a different fair. Or my appointment with Eli Lilly. You can do a couple of things. You can send a message before the fair if you want to. It's okay. You can definitely do that and say that you're looking forward to meeting with them and let them know a little bit about you, or you can just wait until after the fair, which is another option. Once the fair actually opens and it's, say it's what time is this? Turn in one. Let's see. Anyway, if it's 3:20, 5 minutes before, this little thing is going to turn blue. And so then you just click on it, join the video, and you're going to be on screen. All right, I think that's the main stuff. Jean, is there anything else you want me to add? Okay. Questions about the session scheduling at all? Yeah.
I didn't look at the roles like necessarily. I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Like cancel the session.
I would just go back in and, because you should still be able to see what, so the question was for those of you online, if I signed up for a role but didn't look to see if there was an actual title, you should be able to still see any other available sessions. So I wouldn't cancel a session before you find out if there's another one available. Okay. Yeah. So look and see. So if it's PepsiCo or something like that, look and see if there are other times and other types of roles available. And if there's something that you would prefer, then you can actually have multiple sessions with the same company. So click on another session in some cases. So click on the other session, and then if you want to cancel the first one, you can definitely do that up until the fair. All right. I think it's actually called remove yourself from the session or something like that. All right, so what do you need to do? I talked about this earlier, but looking at what am I bringing, what's valuable, what can I contribute to a particular company, and being able to have sort of a story to go along with that. That's the first step before you even jump in. So what are your skills? What experiences have you had? What do you want to do? What are you interested in? I would also encourage you to kind of know where any weakness spots are or holes. Not so much because you want to tell the employers that, but just so that you know what they are. So again, back to the example I used earlier, maybe it's a full-time job and you've never had an internship in that particular industry. That could potentially be a challenge. Not one that's impossible to overcome by any means. You can definitely do that, but it's important for you to know what might be something that could hold you back. The reason I think that's important is because then you focus on the things that you do have. So no, I haven't actually had an internship in this exact field, but I've had an internship doing something else. Or I've done some undergraduate research that was related to this area. Or been involved in a student organization or whatever the case might be. But you have something that, if you've got this hole, can kind of compensate for having that hole. I would also recommend, particularly if you're going to have some one-on-ones, that you have some stories ready to go. So the common things that employers typically ask about, although they'll ask some technical questions too in some cases, they tend to ask about your communication skills, your teamwork, your leadership abilities. And then all that could even be conflict stories. So employers are looking for candidates that have great, fresh ideas and that are willing to speak their mind without being overbearing, of course. So they don't want somebody who's going to come in and be a big bully, but they are looking for somebody who's going to be willing to speak up in situations. So sometimes they'll ask questions about that. Is there a time that you spoke up or that you spoke your mind? Or did you have conflict with somebody else at work? Whatever the case might be. Now, you do want to be careful how you tell your stories, of course, but I would recommend having those stories ready to go. Other types of things that come up often are, How is your organization? Are you good with like time management and meeting deadlines? That tends to be a pretty common area as well. And then problem solving, like, are you able to figure things out? Perhaps even also ethics might be issues that would come up. So do you have a time that you had to think through ethically a challenge? So maybe it's something as simple as, hey, my roommate didn't finish homework and we're in the same class. So do you let your roommate copy your homework? So things like that. A lot of times students think, well, I've never really faced a huge ethical situation, but we all have. They might not be like insurmountable. They might be small things, but think through your stories that you have so that you're ready to share those. In that one-on-one, you're going to start by introducing yourself, but then the rest of it's pretty much going to be you ask them questions and they ask you questions. So it's not going to be a full-fledged interview, but it'll be a back and forth exchange of questions. So you want to have those stories ready to go for when you do get those. A short verbal summary that allows you to introduce yourself. So that would be something like your name, your degree, your major, and then whatever other pieces you want to highlight about yourself. It's short, so probably even shorter than what you would do in an in-person career fair, if you've been to one of those before. So I would say, a few sentences that tell about some experiences that you want to highlight or a skill that you want to highlight. And then I recommend ending with a question, because then that kind of helps turn the okay, it's your time to talk now, over to the recruiter. And if you can tie that question back to what you've just talked about, even better. So maybe one of the things you're talking about is a student organization that you were in and you got to be treasurer. And the thing you liked the most about being treasurer was having to like help all these different people and balance all these things going on at once. And so then you can end with a question like, do interns get to collaborate with a lot of different people and sort of have lots of things that they organize at your company? It's a really bad example, but basically you're tying it back to what you've just talked about. And then you ask that question. So having questions to ask is also very crucial. They are going to ask you questions, but you want to have some things ready too. And some of those can be the generic questions that you ask of every employer that you talk to. So what types of projects do people start out within their first year at your company? You could ask that of anybody. But I would also recommend that you do enough research that you can ask a specific question or two based on what they're doing, based on something you've watched in a video, whatever the case might be, so that you have something that's relevant. A few years ago, one of our big companies went through a huge merger, like huge, all over the news. And one of the recruiters was here on campus and talking to me and said, not a single student asked about that. Nobody. And it's like, you can't miss it. So knowing at least if it's really popular and something that's really big and going on, being able to fashion questions about that. Now on the flip side, because I work primarily with chemistry and chemical engineering students, a few years ago when we had the Deep Horizon BP Gulf rig explosion, probably not the first question you want to ask is, what are you doing for safety because of this oil rig explosion? So being able to ask questions about what's going on in the current events, but not to do so in a confrontational way either, if there's something negative. I would also encourage you to write down the recruiter's name that you speak with. I would even recommend that you get an email address or ask for an email address. So an easy way to do that, or an easier way to do that, would be as you're sort of wrapping up at the end of your 10 minutes, saying something like, I really enjoyed talking with you. Do you have an email address that I could follow up with if I had additional questions? That leaves it up to them to either give you their personal email address or just a generic email address for their company. So you can, as you probably saw a few screens ago, you can message employers through the Handshake platform after the fair, before the fair. So that's an option if for some reason you forget to ask what their email address is. That being said, employers only have so many messages that they can send back to students. So if you send something through there, you may never hear from them and you don't know why. You don't know if they have run out of their allotted number of messages they can send, or if they never even got it. Because some of our employers have their notifications, just like some of our students do, on Handshake set so that they actually have to log into the Handshake platform in order to see their messages. They don't actually come to their email boxes. And so if they're, okay, I'm done with the fair, I'm not even going to think about it again, they don't log back into Handshake, they're not going to see your message. So if you have an email address, you can email them from your email address and send them a little note saying, thank you, it was nice talking with you. I enjoyed learning about X, Y, and Z. Look forward to hearing from you soon. Just a couple of sentences to follow up. But I would, because you all are here at this workshop, I would recommend doing that as opposed to messaging through Handshake. The other thing is it's going to make you stand out a lot more because everybody else is going to just send messages through Handshake. And then finally, I would recommend, because twofold, some of the one-on-ones do end up being almost more like an interview. And if not, many of our companies are going to be conducting and setting up interviews right after the fair. So because we're on a Thursday, you may even end up with an interview on Friday. And if you're not prepared with thinking through those stories, thinking about the STAR method for answering behavioral questions, it's going to be a lot harder for you. So you've got a week now that you can do that. So what is the STAR method? Is usually the next question. And it stands for situation, task, action, and result. So when you're answering questions, you want to be sure that you're hitting on all four of those: situation, task, action, and result. A lot of our students do really well at describing, oh, here's the situation, here are the action steps that I take or took, but then they forget about the results. And that's really crucial. So an example would be, if a company says, tell me about a time that you worked on a team. And you say, oh, my program, my major that I'm in, we do a lot of teamwork in classes. So I've been in lots of different teams. And typically the role that I play in a team, that's not what they're looking for. Instead, they want you to tell them, which class were you working on a team in? And what did that team look like? Was it made up of people you picked? Did the professor assign? How big was your team? Give me some specific details. Then they want those action steps. So what specifically did you do as part of that team? So maybe, you know, we were really struggling, we weren't getting together, things weren't happening. So I took the initiative to step forward and, you know, get our calendars together and actually assign meetings and assign tasks for each person in our group. So that's your action. And then as a result, our team was able to finish the project on time and we got an A in the class or an A on the project or whatever. So that's the action as well as the results. So being very specific is what they're looking for. And the reason they want the specifics is because it really helps them to determine, like, if this is the way you were in the past, most likely you're going to use those same behaviors in the future when you come work for us. So that's why that method is really effective. I would also encourage you to be sure that you're preparing your space. So because you're on camera, you can have whatever you want on your desktop or your lap or whatever, wherever you are. So have the right things with you. So be sure to have a copy of your resume. Have something, not so that you sit there and read the resume the whole entire time, but that if you need to glance at it, you can do so. Have some notes. If you're thinking through these questions while you're doing the research on the companies, write those down and so that you can bring those with you. I would also encourage you, if you think of a question that might be challenging to answer, you can also use a source like glassdoor.com to find out what types of questions a company typically might ask in an interview, or talk to your friends who've met with that company in other situations and find the same thing out. And if you hear like, oh gosh, that could be a really hard question, jot some notes so that you can remind yourself. Now, don't write out your whole answer because then you'll be reading it and it'll sound just like this and, you know, you sound like a robot. But jot some notes so that you can refresh your memory of how you want to answer that question. I would also absolutely recommend that you have a notebook or something to write on and a pen. It's probably going to be easier than trying to put things, you know, write things down in a phone or on an iPad, unless you have an actual iPad writer. But generally have something that you can take notes if they say something. They might even tell you, okay, tomorrow at 2:30 is going to be your interview. You don't want to forget and think it was at 3. Also set the stage. Test your technology in advance. So you can't actually test the actual link with the employer, but you can make sure that your speakers are working and set and so forth. And you can actually do that through a link that if you look at the Handshake help, that will show you. Look at your background as well. So many of you will probably be meeting with employers like in a bedroom or in an apartment or something like that. So make your bed. Even simple things like that, make sure that your background isn't revealing something that you don't want an employer to see or doesn't look messy. I would also encourage you to watch your lighting. So if you've got lighting, whether it's from a natural window or something behind you, that's going to make it harder to see your face and probably add a glare to the screen. So if you are only in a spot where you can only sit with the window behind you, try to also add a light from the front so that that can help your face. Cameras, as much as possible, should be at eye level or even a little bit above. That makes you have to look at the camera as opposed to watching the screen, and it makes it look more like you're actually making eye contact with the recruiters that you're talking to. But again, test that, make sure everything's working really well. So we can't control noise because things are going to be unexpected, fire alarms or whatever happen. It's not something you can control. But for the things that you can control, if your roommates are going to be home and they're always noisy, find another location. Many offices, career offices on campus, do allow students to come in and use interview space. Are you guys, Jean, doing that? Yeah. Okay. So talk to your career services office if you don't have a quiet space. See if there's something available where you can, or even sometimes in a library or something like that, you can have space. If you have a dog or a pet, make sure that you've got them out of the room as well. You also want to be dressed professionally. So how you look, fair or not, does say how credible I think you are going to be. So you want to look professional. You also want, and I'll explain what that means in a minute, you also want to make eye contact. And again, make your eye contact with the camera as opposed to with the screen, because if you look like you're looking at the screen, now you're not actually making eye contact. So it feels a little unnatural to stare at a camera when you can see in your peripheral vision their face. But as much as possible, try to, especially when you're talking, try to look at the camera as opposed to the screen. No gum. Make sure your cell phone is not just turned on vibrate, but completely turned off, or even get it out of the room if you can. We have this natural tendency, as tied as we are to our untethered phones, to look at it. And so you only have 10 minutes or you only have 30 minutes with that recruiter. Make sure that your cell phone isn't going to be a distraction. Try to smile, not like you don't have to smile the whole entire time. You can't even see me. You don't have to smile the whole entire time, but smile when you're talking about something you're excited about, or smile when you're introducing yourself, just to show that you're engaged. Try to pay attention to your nonverbals, but don't obsess about them. And that doesn't necessarily just mean hand gestures, but even like if you're sitting in a really comfortable chair and you have, sliding around or moving around because it's a really comfortable chair, probably not going to create the best impression. So it's better probably to sit in a slightly uncomfortable chair if it makes you, you don't have to sit up like perfectly straight, but at least to sit up, have good posture, be engaged. And then I've talked about background already. So clean and quiet background, camera and eye level are just above. So these are just some not good examples of what to wear. So no sunglasses, generally no hats on your head unless it's a religious attire. Make sure that any facial hair, any head hair is all sort of neatly groomed. And it does depend a little bit on the type of industry or the type of employer that you're talking to. Obviously, some are much more flexible than other types of employers. So depending on who you're interested in talking with, try to pay attention to that as well. Make sure your clothes fit you well. So if you do have to borrow clothes from a roommate or a friend, try to make sure that they fit as well as possible. Bright colors are okay, again, depending on the employer, but for other employers that are more conservative type employers, some of our finance companies and so forth, probably more conservative attire, colors and so forth are better. This is the really formal look. Now, for those of you who are going to an on-site interview down the road, maybe you're going to go into a manufacturing plant or a lab or out into the field somewhere, probably open-toed shoes would not be good. Or probably even bare legs may not be something you want to look at. talk to your career services office for the type of an employer that you're interviewing with to find out how you should best dress. But if you want to go really conservative, this is the look you're looking at. These two, number 1 and number 3, are your business professional. Number 2 and number 4 are your business casual. So if an employer tells you casual is fine, then typically you're looking at business casual. Again, it kind of depends on the employer though, so check with your career services office. For this, for the career fair, I would recommend erring on the business professional side, even if it's only from the top up. You know, if you want to be a little more comfortable on the bottom, I think that's probably fine, especially for a career fair. Now, I know a lot of students don't have business professional clothing. So if you don't, just come as close as you can, and that's fine too. All right, so general advice about career fairs from employers. One of the things they're really looking for is students who are enthusiastic. So if you're there just strictly because they had a session available and a time open, they're gonna see that. They're talking to enough students, they're gonna sense your enthusiasm or your engagement. You also do need to sort of sell yourself, like be excited about what you've done and what you have to contribute. Sometimes it's really hard as a student because you know you haven't done a ton of things yet. You're young, employers aren't expecting that. They don't expect you to have 12 years of experience that's directly related to the field. That's typically just not gonna be the case. But you wanna be excited about what you do have and think about the experiences that you have led and held and how they fit and how they might contribute to that employer. You also have to, as I mentioned earlier, know something about the organization and know about yourself. And then my mom hat, the mom in me says, you have to be rested. It's like going in for a test. If you have stayed up all night, you just don't think as well. And some of the questions you might get might be things that you hadn't thought about before. So if you're tired because you've stayed up all night before the fair, it's going to be harder to think and process on your feet. So as much as possible, be rested, eat well, take care of yourself, and then have questions prepared to ask the recruiters. Sometimes you're actually doing research for the future. So maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe you talked to a company that was really interesting to you, but they weren't necessarily interested in you. That's okay. It doesn't mean that somewhere down the road, you might not be able to use that experience. Sometimes students will talk to a company who says, oh yeah, we don't hire freshmen for interns. We only hire sophomores or juniors. That's okay. Ask them, I understand, what things can I do over the next year to make me a great candidate for your company? So if they say, oh, well, I'm really looking for X, Y, and Z. Now, you know, maybe those are things you should get involved in over the next year. Even if you're about to graduate, you're probably not going to stay in the same job and maybe not even with the same company for the rest of your life. So by attending a career fair, learning about some of these different companies, you may have something later on down the road that you say, I'm going to reach back out to this recruiter that I met or somebody at that company, or check for a job posting on their website. So sometimes you're researching not just for now, but longer term. You do want to know enough about the company not to say, well, what jobs do you have available? Most of those are going to be, many of those are going to be listed on Handshake. You can also go to the company's website to see what current positions they have open. So you want to have at least some idea of that before you meet with them. For a career fair, a lot of students think they're going to be walking away with a job in hand. And that generally is not the case. You're really just there to make contacts, to network, to learn a little bit more. Now, hopefully it leads to an interview, and then the interview leads to the job offer. But at this point, really it's just about connecting with employers. Would encourage you to take initiative, especially when you're in that one-on-one. Don't wait for the recruiter to say, oh, hi, Patricia. You could just jump in and say, hi, I'm Patricia. Well, you wouldn't say Patricia, but if it was me, I would say, hi, I'm Patricia. And here's my degree and my major and so forth. So just jump right in. In a group session, if it's a group smaller than 15, you can ask questions, unmute yourself and so forth, and interact with the recruiters and with the other students that are there. Now, you don't want to be dominating the conversation and be the only one asking the questions, but I would say take the initiative. The other thing I would recommend doing when you do ask a question is saying, hi, I'm Patricia, I'm a junior in chemistry, something like that, so they can continually remember your name to your face, to your degree and so forth. Now, if you've already said it once in the session, you don't need to keep saying it again, but definitely take that initiative. Whenever you meet with an employer, find out what's going to happen next. So what's the next stage? What's their timeline like? Are they doing interviews? What type of interviews? Are they going to be doing them via Skype? Do you have to take some type of an assessment first? Find out what the process looks like and what the timeline is. Many of them are going to say the next step is that you have to apply online. Since you all are here today, I would actually recommend, if there are companies that you're interested in, or definitely those that you've already signed up for sessions for, go to their company website and apply online before the fair. Because when they say, well, the next step is that you have to apply online, you can actually respond with something like, well, because you're a company I'm really interested in, I've already done that. So what's next? And that will be impressive to them. You can always ask if there's anything additional that you need. And this is kind of my formal, like, to advance your candidacy. You're probably not going to talk like that, but is there anything that I can do to make me a better applicant, or to, help reach somebody I need to reach out to move me along in the process? Those are great questions to ask too. And then, as I mentioned earlier, instead of using the send message through Handshake, if you've got an email address from them, or if they've given you that, you've asked for it, send them a quick thank you. 3-4 sentences is all you really need to do. But if you don't have that, at the very least, send that message through Handshake. The other thing that I would strongly encourage you to do is to respond to any message that you get. So a lot of employers are sending out, hey, you should sign up for a session with me, or hey, you should do this. And a lot of them, quite frankly, seem like junk, but you never know unless you actually check the company out. So if there's a way to respond to that employer, I would recommend that you do that. Thank you for reaching out to me. I'll take a look. Whatever. Even if you know, like, I'm not interested in this company, it still shows really great maturity and ethics by just following back up with them. Be positive no matter what the situation. So from my own experience, there was a time that I did not get a job offer at a school that I was really interested in. And I kind of knew why. Like, I just didn't get along with the person who was the director. I could tell that there was just not good vibes. Loved everybody else that I met, and I didn't get the offer. That's fine. I stayed positive. I thanked them. I sent thank you notes. And about 2 weeks later, I got a phone call, and they said, hey, Patricia, so our director is no longer here. Would you be interested in that job instead? So I basically went from applying for an assistant director to being essentially offered the director position. I'd already accepted another job, so I did not want to turn them down after I'd already said yes, but you never know. And back to that thing that I said, sometimes you're researching for the future. So even if things are kind of bumpy or don't go well, that one recruiter that you interacted with that didn't have the most positive experience, they might not be there 3 years down the road, and you can apply again or talk to them again if they're a company you're interested in. The other thing I strongly advise students to do if things don't go the way you want it to, well, maybe you didn't like the company and it's fine, but if you liked the company and they don't make you an offer, I would recommend reaching back out and asking for feedback. Thanks for letting me know that you're not going to be proceeding with an interview for me or for an offer with me. Obviously, I'm still going to be looking for a role. Do you have any feedback for things that I can do to improve with the next company that I interact with? Because sometimes they'll say they can't say anything, but sometimes they'll actually give you something that you can learn from. And it might be something so basic, like, well, I didn't really feel like you were interested after, you did X, Y, or Z behaviors, or you didn't have any questions to ask me. And so that led me to think that you weren't interested. So now, anytime you interview with anybody ever again, you want to be sure that you have those questions ready. Sometimes it can provide some helpful feedback. The other thing, you keep practicing, reviewing your interviews, practicing and reviewing your interviews until you get that signed letter saying, we want to hire you. So that is all I have for tonight. I'm going to stop